Hello everybody, and welcome to my updated review of Total War Warhammer 2's Mortal Empires campaign. Now for those that don't know, Mortal Empires is a DLC for Total War Warhammer 2 that unlocks when you own both Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2. Now when activated, it lets you play on a hybrid campaign map that includes a large portion of the first game's map in the old world and most of the second game's map in the new world. This map is largely the focus of where most of the player base of Warhammer 2 is right now. It's the only place where all the legendary lords of both games can be encountered, and just recently it received some extended territories and a massive performance upgrade. Now as a sort of lapsed Total War Warhammer 2 player, I hadn't played the game in just over a year, and I thought now would be a great time to revisit the game and go through some of the changes and talk about the current state of Mortal Empires. This review is going to be largely positive. Spoilers, I've been really enjoying it, more so than ever, but we do have a few things to address right off the bat. Now as mentioned, Mortal Empires is listed as a free DLC for Total War Warhammer 2, and if you were just browsing the sales on Steam and you spot the game and you check the DLC, it's listed there as free. No need to click into it, why would you? It's there, it's free, you have it. However, this isn't obviously the case. If you do click into it, you'll see numerous messages about requirements of a different game that are needed to activate it. Now, as far as I know, this is the only game on Steam to have a DLC that unlocks when you own another game. And Steam doesn't really have the proper infrastructure to display that kind of support on its front end. Now, as a result, a few people have fallen into a trap of buying the game, assuming they have Mortal Empires as it was listed as free, and then realizing that they need to buy another game to use it. And you might say, well look, Warhammer 1 is 75% off, that's true, you can get it pretty cheap, but if you get caught between those sales, you either have to wait or fork up $60. So I'm simply mentioning this just to clear up any confusion for people who are less familiar with this franchise, and it is a shame that Creative Assembly just can't find a better solution to this. As many people in their reviews point out, they'd rather just buy an old world DLC pack that gives them the 4 old world races that have an entirely different game. It is weird, and it'll get even weirder when Warhammer 3 comes around, needing you to buy 2 other games to have access to its total combined map. So hopefully something can be done there. No doubt bundles are going to help with that, or maybe more clever ways to display it on Steam. It's a shame that Total War Warhammer isn't just one product with a continuously expanding map with expansions and races. That would probably benefit the developers, I'm sure it'd be easier, and the players, but it probably just wouldn't make as much business sense. You know, selling full price games probably makes more money, as does slightly confusing people, I would imagine. And I know for experienced Total War players that this can just be largely shrugged off as not a problem, but it is unusual and people are getting stuck and have gotten stuck. Anyways, the next thing I wanted to mention is for consumers who are no doubt looking at this video during a sale, wondering what DLCs to get and how does it all factor into Mortal Empires. Well, let's just say that you have Warhammer 1 and 2, as that's what you need for Mortal Empires. This already then gives you access to a total of 9 races. You have the Empire, Dwarfs, Greenskins, Vampire Counts, Bretonnia, High Elves, Dark Elves, Lizardmen, and Skaven. That's what you can play as without any DLC, just the 2 base games combined together. However, even without owning any of that DLC, you're still going to get to encounter and be able to fight against all other races that are in the game. So Chaos, Beastmen, Wood Elves, Norsca, Tomb Kings, and the Vampire Coast, as well as all the different legendary lords that have been added over time with DLC. They're sort of like on the disc already, you just kind of pay to play as them. And that's a really great pro-consumer thing. So when people ask me what DLC should they get, I often just say, just get the race that you're most interested in, because you're going to be able to play as that race. You'll get around 50 hours minimum, I would say, out of it, and then you just move on to another one if you want. There's no reason to really buy all the races at the beginning, because you only really get to play one at a time unless you want to have multiple campaigns, which is kind of strange. And the cool thing is, I guess depending how you look at it, you do encounter them in battle and you get to check out their units. So it's sort of like an advert, you know. I recently fought against the Skaven Lord Snick, and he's got some crazy units that I'd never seen before, and it sort of makes me want to buy that pack to use those units myself. I guess if I was being cynical, you know, that would be kind of annoying if you were playing Skaven and you didn't have those Skaven units and you're coming up against them. I guess that would be kind of annoying, but I still think it's better than just, I don't know, it's kind of nice to be able to see them. I lean towards that at least. Now for general recommendations, I'd recommend the Tomb Kings, Norsca, and the Vampire Coast. I think those ones play the most differently, and they're also the most thematically interesting, but that one really is just personal preference. I think they're all fairly high quality DLCs, so you honestly really can't go wrong. Now the Beastmen and Wood Elves, They're the oldest race pack, so they kind of were the ones that maybe aren't as fleshed out as the rest. They do have their own mini campaigns though, but you have to play that in Warhammer 1. You can't access it in Warhammer 2, so no one really does that. If you own Warhammer 2 and 1, no one's really playing Warhammer 1. Everyone's sticking with 2. So anyway, moving on. When I originally reviewed Total War Warhammer 2, there was no Mortal Empires yet, and because of the repetition of the Vortex campaign, the reused assets from the previous game, and then only having 4 races again, I was a little bit harder on the game in my score. And then when Mortal Empires rolled around a month later, I was also kind of hard on that because the map was shrunken and distorted kind of beyond what CA said it would be, with parts of the Southlands, Lustria and Nagarond cut off. The turn times in Mortal Empires were also extremely slow, and none of the older races had any new content. They were just sort of ported into the game. And because of all that, I was just a bit down on Mortal Empires, and I never really enjoyed it that much. Until now. There's a few key areas that I want to mention improvements, which has made me playing Mortal Empires feel very fresh for me and very fun. The first is that several of the original Old World races have received new content for free, whether it be entirely new legendary lords or entirely new mechanics. The dwarfs now have a rune forge where they can craft items and armor, and it ties into their numerous grudges. The Empire have an elector count system and prestige resource. The game no longer has weird factions named after the races like the Vampire Counts. Now they're named Sylvania and they're led by Manfred von Karstein. This is true of all races now. The game finally has proper factions, and many existing ones have been given their own start positions. I played as Ungrim Ironfist, the Slayer King, and he now has his own start location as well as his own banner and colours, which just adds so much flavour and replayability to the game. The same can be said for the likes of Balthazar Gelt, now in charge of the Golden Order to the south of Altdorf, and Repanse de Lioness, a brand new legendary lord in charge of the Chevaliers de Lioness on the coast of Araby, relatively far from where, you'd be used to playing if you were playing Bretonnian before. These lords often have their own little, minor mechanics as well. Repanse has some changes to desert attrition, allowing her to remain immune from it if she's stationed in a town for a few turns. It's not just the old world races that have received these updates, there's also a legendary lord for each of the Warhammer 2 races that have been added for free. You've got Tretch Craventail for Skaven, Alethanar for High Elves, Lockhear Fellheart for Dark Elves, and Gorrock for the Lizardmen. Each of these come with their own unique start locations and abilities as well. With all of these additions, the map's getting quite crowded. After all, if we include the DLCs, because they're in the game already, currently 59 legendary lords are in the game, and while they don't all have unique starting areas, a lot of them do. And even with this super large map of around 300 settlements, that doesn't give much room to breathe. But with the latest free update alongside the Shadow and Blade DLC, Mortal Empires has just expanded for the first time in its 2-year lifespan, adding in 14 new settlements across 5 provinces. This new area is where 2 of the new paid DLC lords reside, but you can of course encounter them for free and conquer anywhere in the world you want. And I did just that. As Ungrim, packed up my slayers and I ventured south to check out this new area. It was actually kind of coincidental, I hadn't planned on it, but seeing it was new and it was right there, I thought why not? I ended up getting ambushed by Schnick's deadly mortar units, but after decimation, I eventually pushed back and removed the grudge with Ungrim. Now, it was really fun, super annoying chasing Skaven around without cavalry, but it was fun nonetheless. Now, with the biggest part of this update that makes Mortal Empires truly playable is the performance increase. Now, I'm not sure on the exact timing or statistics, but in my experience, it seems now that when you end turns, it's about 5 times faster than it was before. It's a huge improvement. You'd normally be expecting something like a 10% improvement, 20% performance, whatever. This is like 500%. It's really, really much faster. It's very, very noticeable. You cannot miss it. Now, as Ungrim, I was able to roleplay a little bit, sitting in my mountains and just kind of clicking a few upgrades, spamming end turn. I completed 180 turns. I did a lot of my quests, and I just kind of sat back in a small amount of territory, fought off some chaos invasions. It's kind of hard to express how tedious those turn times would have been, because before, essentially if you only had 1 or 2 things to do, you'd often be spending longer waiting for turns to end than actually playing the game, especially early on in campaigns where you do start small. Now, in terms of the campaign itself, I think it's actually in a really great place now. The combination of Warhammer 2's features into the old world, such as searching ruins for treasure, exploring the sea, numerous world events and faction events every few turns, the game feels so much more alive than it did before. Now, I'm not sure if quests have been rewritten or not, but my quests for Ungrim actually felt very immersive in what I was doing and how I was tracking them. The major settlements I took over had unique buildings and felt rewarding to upgrade. Diplomacy feels a lot tighter with much less weird stuff happening, though that does, weird things do still happen that definitely would never really happen in the lore, but that's part of the fun of the sandbox. Without new units for the dwarfs, I thought I'd get bored of battle, but I still have like little small things that would help here and there, such as a lot of them to do with the crafting items. One of them let me spawn in a ghostly apparition that would fight alongside me, so it almost felt like a new unit. And the game's not completely perfect. Chaos seem to be pretty weak right now, mostly dying off before they become a real threat. The world does seem to also largely ally against Chaos, so right now my entire old world is basically allied together, making the prospect of anyone attacking anyone inside of this alliance suicidal. Sieges of course could do with a revamp or the introduction of maybe minor settlement battles, and diplomacy does feel a little bit lacking after 3K, but these things I think are going to be likely put into Warhammer 3, I feel. So generally, a lot of the grudges I had with Mortal Empires have been put right by CA. The old world content has been revamped and made feel fresh, at least for me. There's plenty more lords, both paid and free, to experiment with and increase replayability. There's new places on the map to visit, and the turn times have been vastly improved. The community have also picked up some of the slack when it comes to the more tedious aspects of the game. The battle maps, especially with sieges, are really repetitive, but with the GCCM mod, Grand Campaign Custom Maps, I think, many community-made maps are being collected into one mod, they're being tested and implemented into the game to improve variety. It's an excellent addition and a must-have. I fought a siege with 2 walls uphill. It was really fantastic. It made me think very differently about how I was going to approach things, and while the AI doesn't make perfect use of everything, they didn't actually use the second wall, it's definitely still more challenging because as I was kind of curving around up to the second gatehouse, they had a vantage point and were shooting down on me, so it was still much more challenging than just a regular siege, and it just made me think differently. What's very interesting is then when you come across a vanilla siege again, you actually feel like it's something different because, it just breaks up that kind of repetition and monotony. You're like, oh, I haven't played a vanilla one in a while. That mod has been such a fantastic addition, and I might actually try my hand at making a map as I did before with the tools, before it released a long time ago and had a good response. And that's it for my updated review for Mortal Empires. It was just a quick one, I just did a campaign, I had a lot of fun with it, so I just wanted to make a quick video to kind of update my audience for anyone who maybe remembers that I was a bit down on Warhammer before, especially Mortal Empires. Essentially, taking a year hiatus from the game, and basically 2 years from Mortal Empires, because I never touched Mortal Empires again, I just kind of played the Vortex when it got its race packs. It meant that I arrived back to a plethora of content, reworked races, major performance improvements, updated community mods, and the whole thing is currently slashed for price during the Steam sale. So Warhammer 1 is currently 75% off, and 2 is 66% off during the winter sale, at least right now. And as I mentioned, getting both gives you access to 9 playable races, with numerous lords and new mechanics to sink your teeth into, no DLC needed. While the separate game issue will still probably catch a few people out, and that does suck, if you are an informed consumer, which you should be now, you'll get amazing value for money out of this package if you haven't already. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.